The same hunger. Jordan. Yes.
Michael Jordan always trying to improve his shot position, the ability to put it on the
high fly ball, center field, well struck. PCA back, some more and it's gone.
It wasn't there, so now he's got to throw it deep to the end zone.
What a play by McDavid to set up Connor Brown.
It's the creativity on the left, and it's Bukayo Saka.
The McLarens collide! Lando Norris into the wall and out of the race!
No one in the history of the sport has hit more threes in a season than Clark has this year.
And with that, beats none other than Steph Curry,
The thing about breaking through is,
shooter.
Nobody tells you what breaking through actually costs. Every league wants it. More eyes, more noise, more validation. But the second you get it, the game changes completely. Because growth doesn't come with instructions. It comes with expectations you didn't know you signed up for. The WNBA is there right now, standing at the edge of something it's been building toward for decades. Record viewership, sold-out arenas, mainstream media coverage that actually matters. From where you're sitting, it probably looks like everything's finally working, like the pieces are falling into place. But inside that success is a different reality, one where everything moves faster than anyone planned for, where the spotlight doesn't wait for you to be ready, where yesterday's system gets tested by today's demand, and there's no pause button to figure it out. This is what happens when you go from being overlooked to being watched. Small leagues can make mistakes quietly. Big leagues make mistakes publicly. And once you're visible, really visible, every decision gets analyzed. Every delay gets questioned. Every silence gets interpreted. It's not fair, but it's real. When a league takes too long to respond, people don't think patience anymore. They think avoidance. When messages feel vague, it's not seen as diplomacy. It's seen as dodging. What used to be forgiven as growing pains now looks like a choice, like something that could have been handled better. This isn't about picking the league apart. This is about understanding the moment. The WNBA isn't asking for attention anymore. It has it. It's not proving it belongs. It does. But now it's being measured the same way every professional league gets measured, with real stakes, real scrutiny, real expectations that don't bend just because the road was hard. That's the price of relevance. For years, the fight was just to be seen, to get a seat at the table, to be taken seriously. That fight's over. The new fight is about what you do once people are actually paying attention. Because fans who show up don't just disappear. When things feel off, they talk about it. Broadcasters who invest don't stay quiet when execution stumbles. They reevaluate. Sponsors who commit want stability, not uncertainty. They want to know their bet was smart. Growth removes the safety net. It takes away the excuse of being small. It replaces potential with performance. The league didn't just gain an audience. It inherited a standard. And that standard doesn't care how long the climb took. It just cares what happens next.
Don't get it twisted. Don't get it. Caitlin Clark is the reason why a lot of great things are going to happen.
Caitlin Clark didn't create this wave. She accelerated it. What might have unfolded gradually over half a decade got condensed into months. Not because of drama or headlines, but because of something harder to manufacture. Sustained interest that didn't drop off after the first week. Once the novelty wore thin, something unexpected happened. People kept watching. Games weren't background noise anymore. They became appointment viewing. The kind where you clear your schedule and tell people you're busy. The kind where missing it means missing out on the actual conversation the next day. That's the shift nobody saw coming. Before, interest in the league flickered. It'd spike during playoffs, maybe around the draft, then fade back into silence until something forced it back into view. The rhythm was predictable, casual, conditional. Now the rhythm's different. The conversation doesn't pause anymore. It doesn't wait for permission to start back up. It just runs. Every night there's a game, people are locked in. Every highlight gets passed around. Every storyline gets dissected in real time. The league went from something people checked in on occasionally to something people follow religiously. And that changes everything. Because when attention becomes constant, so does scrutiny. When fans are invested daily, they notice patterns. They remember what was said last week. They hold the league accountable for consistency because they're showing up consistently. Clark didn't just bring eyes. She brought expectations. She raised the baseline for what people think this league should look like, how it should operate, how it should communicate. She made casual fans into serious ones. And serious fans don't let things slide. They ask questions. They want answers. They compare what they see to what they know. Professional sports should be. That's the real impact. Not just the attendance bump or the ratings spike. It's the shift in how people engage. The WNBA isn't a novelty anymore. It's not a feel-good story you tune into once a season. It's a league people actually care about. A league people argue about. A league people expect more from because they're giving more to it. Clark turned passive interest into active investment. And once that happens, you can't go back. You can't ask people to lower their standards after they've raised them. You can't ask them to care less after they've started caring more. The spotlight she brought isn't going anywhere. It's permanent now. And permanent attention means permanent pressure. The kind you can't avoid. The kind you have to meet head on.
And at guard from Iowa, wearing number 22, Caitlin Clark.
Had to earn every single night. It just existed. Expected. Automatic. That's the marker of real change. Not when numbers go up, but when behavior rewires itself. When people rearrange their evenings around tip-off. When social media doesn't need a reminder to pay attention. When the league stops being a choice and starts being a given. Once that shift happens, institutions can't keep moving at the old pace. The audience moved. The infrastructure has to follow. Not because it wants to, but because staying still isn't an option anymore. And this is exactly where the confusion sets in. People look at the unbalanced attention and immediately assume motive. They see one player getting more airtime and read it as favoritism. They notice certain storylines dominating and think the league handpicked them. They interpret focus as strategy, like someone upstairs decided who matters and who doesn't. But that's not what's actually happening. The league didn't engineer this. It responded to it. The attention didn't come from the top down. It came from the outside in. Fans decided what they cared about. Media followed where the audience went. The league adapted to the wave it was riding, not the wave it created. What looks like preference is actually reaction. What feels like bias is really Just momentum being managed in real time. This isn't about feelings. It's about infrastructure trying to keep up with demand it never predicted. When one storyline generates 10 times the engagement, broadcasts adjust. When one game pulls massive ratings, networks prioritize similar matchups. When one name drives ticket sales across multiple cities, marketing leans into it. That's not favoritism. That's basic response to measurable reality. The challenge is that response looks uneven, and uneven feels unfair, even when it's logical, even when it's the result of audience behavior, not league manipulation. The league is caught in a structural bind. Do you serve the interest that's already there, or do you spread resources evenly and risk losing the momentum entirely? Do you lean into what's working, or do you force balance and watch engagement drop? There's no clean answer, because the attention isn't distributed evenly, the demand isn't equal across the board, and pretending otherwise doesn't change the math. It just makes the response slower and less effective. What people are experiencing isn't personal. It's procedural. The league is operating inside a system where attention dictates allocation, where visibility creates more visibility, where momentum feeds itself until something else breaks through with equal force. That's not a choice. That's structure. And structure doesn't bend just because it feels unbalanced. It bends when the forces acting on it shift. Number 4. Nobody builds a system designed for a rocket launch. Organizations plan for steady climbs, controlled expansion, manageable increments, then acceleration shows up uninvited and tosses all of that out the window. Control vanishes. Predictability breaks. Progress stops being gradual and starts being violent. Every league believes it'll be different, that it'll navigate growth smarter, cleaner, more prepared than whoever came before. History laughs at that assumption every single time. The NBA didn't glide smoothly into dominance. Once Bird and Magic arrived, there was chaos, franchise instability, labor battles, identity crises about what the league even was. The NFL didn't expand its empire without friction. Money brought power struggles. Television brought compromise. Popularity brought problems nobody anticipated. European soccer didn't handle the investment boom gracefully. Sudden wealth warped competition, inflated expectations, created imbalances that still haven't fully resolved. Growth always arrives first. Stability trails behind, usually by years. That gap in between isn't failure. It's just the reality of what happens when demand outpaces preparation. The messy middle isn't something to avoid. It's something to survive. Managing growth doesn't mean slowing down. It doesn't mean dimming the lights or asking people to care less. It means rebuilding the foundation while the house is still standing, while people are still inside, while everything's still moving. That adjustment happens in places most people never see, in how expectations get communicated before they become public. Pressure, in how exposure gets distributed so it doesn't all land on the same shoulders, in how pressure gets absorbed internally by the organization, instead of deflected outward onto players, in how decisions get shaped in private rooms before they ever reach a press release. This is where leadership actually earns its title, not during crises, not when everything's on fire and the path forward is obvious, but during transitions, during the awkward phase where nothing feels settled and Every choice has downstream consequences. Nobody can fully predict. Transitions determine whether growth becomes foundation or fracture, whether momentum turns into longevity or burns out in spectacular fashion. Pressure doesn't show up where you'd expect. It's not in the bright lights or the sold-out crowds. It's not in the ratings or the sponsorship deals. It lives in the background, in scheduling conflicts that suddenly matter because every game is nationally televised, in coordination between teams that used to operate independently but now need to move in sync, in negotiations that used to be routine but now carry weight because the stakes got higher overnight. When a league grows faster than its infrastructure, alignment stops being a nice to have. It becomes survival. Everything becomes urgent. And urgency rewrites the tone of every conversation. Patience gets shorter. Mistakes get amplified. Decisions that used to happen quietly now happen under a microscope. The room for error shrinks while the consequences of error expand. That's the trade. You wanted visibility. You got it. But visibility doesn't just light up the wins. It exposes everything else, too.
Is the Caitlin Clark effect. Clark will make her regular season WNBA debut on Tuesday when the Indiana Fever take on the Connecticut Sun, and as expected, the game is already sold out. Ticket prices have skyrocketed. Courtside seats for this game are reselling for over $2,000 each. As for the rest of the league, the Las Vegas Aces and Washington Mystics have already moved to bigger venues to accommodate for the demand when Caitlin Clark comes to town. The Indiana Fever have also become the most followed WNBA team on Instagram.
League grows beyond its economic structure, labor talks become inevitable, not because something's failing, but because the ground beneath everything has shifted. Visibility isn't theoretical anymore. Revenue projections look different. Timelines don't stretch the way they used to. The CBA isn't a crisis. It's recalibration. Adjustments happen when a league outgrows the model it was operating under. Leagues that don't matter never renegotiate their terms. Leagues that stay stagnant never feel the pull between different interests. Alignment only becomes critical when there's something genuine on the line. The fact that these discussions are even taking place tells you where things stand. The WNBA has entered a different tier of importance. That doesn't guarantee smooth sailing, but it guarantees significance. How this gets navigated will echo well past this season. The danger isn't conflict. The danger is denial. Acting like the landscape hasn't transformed is how disconnection begins. That's where trust fractures and windows close. The leagues that falter long-term aren't the ones confronting tension directly. They're the ones pretending tension doesn't exist. Growth doesn't reward waiting. It requires truth. The next chapter won't announce itself with headlines or sudden declarations. It'll emerge gradually, through recalibrated standards, through sharper decision-making, through leadership picking transparency over ease, even when that choice weighs heavy. That's how lasting change gets built. Not through singular events, but through consistent realignment. The WNBA didn't stumble into this moment. It fought for credibility. It fought for eyeballs. And now it's inherited accountability. That weight isn't optional anymore. Wanting expansion is simple. Sustaining it is the actual test. Understanding how to steward what you pursued is where organizations prove themselves. When momentum arrives, does stability get prioritized above all else, or does turbulence get accepted as necessary? There's distance between Forward motion and command. Motion generates itself. Command requires construction. Right now the league has movement in abundance, but command is still being assembled. This is when external voices amplify. Every action gets analyzed as intention. Every delay gets decoded. When scrutiny intensifies, even standard challenges start resembling deliberate choices. That's not reasonable, but it's reality. The league isn't just running operations anymore. It's juggling optics, rhythm, and credibility simultaneously. Those dimensions didn't exist at this scale before. They weren't necessary. Momentum rewrites the requirements. Leadership transforms from preservation to navigation, not chasing every opinion, but recognizing which feedback carries weight and why. That's the burden attached to being taken seriously. Fans don't just consume anymore. They monitor trends. They evaluate choices. They spot contradictions that would have gone unnoticed years earlier. That's the byproduct of casual watching becoming committed following. With commitment comes standards. Not flawlessness, but coherence. People want to grasp the reasoning behind decisions. When clarity is absent, doubt rushes in. This doesn't signal collapse. It signals maturation. An evolving audience doesn't just celebrate. It interrogates. And interrogation reflects investment, not abandonment. The question is whether the league answers that engagement with openness or attempts to override it. Quiet used to suffice. Now it just feeds speculation. Every organization hits a threshold where reputation alone stops being enough. The original believers remain, but now there's a broader audience observing intently. That audience doesn't default to optimism. They default to standards. This is when reliability becomes everything. Defined principles, defined communication, defined focus. Not to satisfy critics, but because scale demands it. The league doesn't need reinvention. It needs reinforcement of its identity while adapting to its evolution. That tension is difficult, but essential. Growth isn't something you escape. You either build around it or get pulled forward unevenly. The path ahead determines whether this becomes a defining era or just a transition point. Right now, perception accelerates past facts. Stories form before context arrives. People don't pause for the full picture. They interpret immediately. That's the tax on visibility. The league isn't just evaluated for actions, but for what those actions symbolize. Every move carries subtext, even when motives are straightforward, even when logic is operational. This is when messaging matters as much as execution. Not to manipulate narratives, but to keep voids from speaking louder than truth. When silence lingers, interpretation fills it. The objective now isn't dodging pushback. That's impossible. The objective is framing direction early, enough that progress doesn't get mistaken for disorder or bias. Systems need to be evident, not just functional. Relevance shifts the metrics. Success isn't only about growth or dollars anymore. It's about credibility, steadiness, and advancing without losing the narrative thread. This moment transcends any single season, individual, star, or controversy. It's about an organization facing what it spent years pursuing. Attention wasn't luck. Legitimacy wasn't gifted. Both were built gradually before the spotlight reached this intensity. But legitimacy changes expectations. The WNBA can't operate like it's still proving itself. It has to operate like it's already proven. That means choices resonate deeper. Quiet becomes statement. Pacing shapes perception whether intended or not. This phase doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or obvious wins. It lives in internal strategy, in talks, in how pressure gets managed without ideal solutions. Momentum always reveals vulnerabilities, not to expose, but to force adaptation. What unfolds next won't be determined by online reactions or highlight reels. It'll be shaped behind closed doors by whether leadership chooses honesty over comfort, by whether unity gets built deliberately instead of hoped for, by whether responsibility gets owned or quietly deflected. Every organization reaches the point where support becomes expectation. That threshold has been crossed. There's no reverting to being ignored. There's only progressing with intention. If you want the real insight, the layers beneath the surface, and the shifts shaping what's ahead, stay connected with us and keep following. This chapter is still unfolding, and the full story hasn't been told. We're tracking every angle, every development, every detail they won't broadcast. Drop a like, hit subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and spread the word. Stay locked in for the complete picture behind the game.
Wow! You bet!